All right, well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out and, of course, for welcoming me to this wonderful event and for that great introduction, sort of recounting my whole career. I do want to start by telling you a little bit about myself as a local kid from the Hudson Valley. Basically, in, I believe it was 1979, my mother was first hired as an English professor at the university, and because of that, she and my dad were able to move to this tiny little sleepy town in the Hudson Valley from Long Island, where I was born, and I was raised here in New Paltz, New York. Because of that experience, I had a great opportunity to spend so much time on this campus in the 70s, sorry, not really in the 70s, but in the 80s definitely, and the 90s, and gained an appreciation for not only knowledge but curiosity, something that I wasn't always seeing reflected in some of my other peers who were also attending the local school district here in New Paltz. Long story short, because both of my parents were very much intellectuals, I became obsessed with wanting to know and wanting to understand better the world around me, and of course, to be a storyteller. One of the things that I always thought was so interesting was that basically there were two really important days of the week for us. One, of course, was going to be Sunday morning, because my parents did drag my brother and myself to church frequently against our will. But then also it would be usually Monday afternoon, and that was because we had spent so much of our time on Sunday either with religious services, etc., that Monday was the chance that my parents got a chance to go through all of the Sunday papers, and they were avid consumers of local news. So we're talking everything from the Times Herald Record, from the Kingston Freeman, and of course the Poughkeepsie Journal. And it was through there that I learned that actually it was local news that really gave you a true understanding of the community that you're in. And local news is also something that's so important, especially in our current climate, to support. One of the things that I thought was very interesting that I literally just saw on social media just now was an image, and for people who probably aren't or may not be on Twitter, bear with me, but for the people who I know who are familiar with memes, let me describe for a second. There was a very popular image that had been circulating the web, and it was of a young couple, a young woman, her boyfriend, who is sort of careening his neck to turn around and look at some other hotter, if you will, woman. And the way this person framed these three individuals in this particular meme was that the young woman was local news, the gentleman who's careening his neck around was pretty much everybody, and the quote-unquote hotter chick was the national news, which is what everybody constantly pays all the attention to. And for the record, as a professional journalist, I can say in this current climate, I get it. But it's super, super important to pay attention to what's happening, not only within your local community, but also to local media. The second thing that I happened to find, which literally just came up on social media today, and that was a new study from the Knight and Gallup polls. And basically quoting it, one of the things that they highlighted was one of the challenges facing local news is that Americans still believe local news is doing well financially. And that is the biggest crux of servicing local communities for local news media, is that it really isn't doing well. So much now in our digital age, I think a lot of people have become accustomed to being able to access media for free. There's no other way to put it. I mean, numerous people, myself included, will get frustrated when suddenly the firewall comes up and tells you you've run out of your free articles for this week or whatever. But it's insanely important to not only subscribe to, but to support in any way you can your local media. And one of the reasons why is not only, of course, to make sure that they just stay in business, and that is crucial, to make sure that they stay independent. We've seen numerous stories across the nation where a lot of local media has been bought up by these larger conglomerates who, depending on what your political bend is, you might say that they have an agenda. Two easy people that come to mind is Gannett News, who's been buying up a lot of local media, and then of course Sinclair Media has been buying up a lot of local television broadcasts, and that can of course determine what it is that you get to learn, what kind of spin it is that you might get about your local media. The other really, really important part about supporting your local news is that a lot of people, I think, are hesitant. I meet a lot of young journalism students, and a lot of them have just stars in their eyes. They want to get out there and they want to make a difference, and they want to tell these really great stories. Well, one of the big problems that they come against, I should say very quickly, is that telling those really great stories is incredibly expensive. One of the first things to go when a newspaper will start making cuts to slim their budget is their investigative news teams. It doesn't matter if these journalists have won Pulitzer Prizes. It doesn't matter if they've actually changed laws in a local community. That is usually one of the first places to go. And so then the second complaint comes, well, they don't really do anything that really feels like it's of note. It's just, maybe the local police blotter. That's because that's the cheapest thing to run. Another side effect of not supporting local news is that you can't attract talent. What happens for a lot of journalists is that they find out that it is an incredibly difficult field to work in, not only because of the hours, because you constantly are essentially on call. You're like a doctor of communities, if you will, but you're not making a doctor's salary. You're making very little money. You're not necessarily getting the kind of support that you might think. And so people turn away. People turn to things like, public resources, or they turn to other sort of PR firms or something like that, where they feel as though they can actually get a financial foothold. And supporting local journalists is incredibly crucial to making sure that you have a robust understanding of your community. Another reason why I find the importance of local media so crucial, especially in this day and age, is that we frequently will see stories that will rise up to the national attention, where there's been some sort of malfeasance on the part of, say, someone in law enforcement or someone in local government, and public funds have been mismanaged, et cetera. And when we start finding out, why weren't charges brought, or who makes whatever decision, et cetera, we find out that a lot of this comes down to local media. And again, that's why I would refer back to the meme that I mentioned earlier, which is that, again, while we're all paying so much attention to the national stage, and again, right now, I understand, but we're missing so much of what's going on in our own backyards, and that's where the decisions that are made that affect so many of our lives are happening. And that's incredibly important for any kind of local grassroots organization. If anything's going to get done, if any changes are going to get made, you need to have some sort of connection with the community. The other thing that I always find to be somewhat heartbreaking is that the Hudson Valley is, unfortunately, while it's a beautiful location and it's so great, for weekenders to come up here, we are sandwiched between two local media sources, and so we don't really get the attention that I personally think that we should. Of course, there's New York City, and we technically count as the suburbs. I mean, we still get New York City channels here, but we don't have necessarily someone on beat covering our communities, our issues, what's going on up here. An easy one to throw out there would be that with the gentrification, if you will, of the Hudson Valley, there are some local organizations that are starting to become greatly concerned that with the next census coming up, it might throw off the census numbers and make this region look to be much more affluent than it actually is. And then, of course, that ties into federal dollars and what we get to help support people who are desperately in need. That's another story that might not get the attention that it should. But also because being where we are and that we don't get the attention that we should be, we don't really get a chance to get a full appreciation of who our community is. There's so many people, such a breadth of diversity in the Hudson Valley that I think unfortunately gets missed by a lot of people in our communities. We don't understand that we not only have traditionally, so many things in America are very black and white, but we have very robust immigrant communities. We have very robust communities of people who are, working together through, crossing over lines of different religions or different politics or things like that that we might not know about. And so those are also some of the stories that I think are so important for us to be able to grasp. Now, of course, once again, I will say that we do have some local papers that do make it a point, oh, I've run out of time already, to cover those things, but by all means, when we come up against the holiday season and everybody thinks of, remembers shopping local on Saturday, which again, I can't emphasize is super important, but also I would say Giving Tuesday, subscribe to a local paper. I cannot emphasize how important it is. You are supporting local journalists, you're supporting your community, and you're supporting having a better understanding of where it is we live and who we live with. So thank you.